Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Knitted Dragon, and I'm going to be sipping on my coffee today. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. For my paint today, I've got acrylic paint. The colors that I am using today are titanium white, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, green oxide, Mars black, raw sienna, which I'll probably call yellow, and purple violet. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk and I have two brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush and I have a number 4 round synthetic brush, and I will refer to these as small and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch up your brushes as well if you'd like. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you could purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the same kind of paint and the piece of chalk and all the good stuff in between. So that's there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to be doing for the next step is we're painting our background. So I'm going to be using my large brush, and I'm going to be pre-mixing myself I'm going to call it like a sage green kind of color, which is like a light warm green. So what I did, I've already pre-mixed mine so you can see what I'm shooting for, and I'll show you how I got it. What I did was I used all of my green except for this little amount that I can use for a demonstration, and then I used a lot of brown, and I used a little bit of white. The white will very quickly turn it light, so just add white very cautiously and slowly so it gets to the lightness that you want. It will turn a little bit darker as it dries also, so just when you're making your color, just know that it will get a little bit darker. Or you can just go for a color right out of the bottle, whatever works for you. So I'm going to take my green, I'm going to add about equal parts of brown into it, and then just a little bit of white, and then I'm just going to spin it around. I'm saving some of my brown for later, that's why I'm not using all of mine right now. And once I've got the color that I want, I'll just start adjusting it with a little bit of white until it gets as light as I want it to be. So it's a nice warm green right now, and what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of white as I go to make it into the shade that I want. And then once you've got it in the shade that you want, which I think this is pretty good for me, I'm just gonna mix it in with the rest of it. Once you've got the shade that you like, what you're going to do is you're just going to paint the entire canvas a nice flat color. So I've chosen to do this color because I think it's going to be really complementary to my knitted dragon that I'm going to be creating in a little while. So you could certainly do yours like any kind of tonal value you want, or any kind of color that you want. I'm choosing to do mine a little bit on the natural side, so it doesn't overpower the painting, but it is a nice complement to the colors that I've chosen to do for my dragon. And if you're doing a different color dragon than mine, you might choose, or a different color stuffed animal, or whatever your magical knitting needles are going to create. If you're going to be doing a different color than I'm doing, you can certainly switch up your background. I just recommend doing something that's not going to take away from the the focus of the balls of yarn and of the object that is being knitted or, you know, shown in the painting. So just something complementary, maybe a little bit on the more neutral side. And I'm just going back and forth left to right so I can get a nice even coverage on my canvas. You may, depending on the color that you've chosen to do your background in, you might find that you want to do a second layer. Once it dries, you might find that you have maybe some sections that are not as fully painted as other sections. I know that for me it tends to, on the sides, I get these little almost bald spots or translucent spots. So once it dries, I'll typically go back and kind of hit those with a second layer. But you might have great coverage after the first coat, especially if you're using as much white in your color as I am, because white helps to make that opacity really high where you can't typically see through it, or you have less ability to see through it. So that makes for a nice full coat on the first shot. But sometimes you'll get, once it dries, you'll have those little spots that you want to finish. So once I get done doing this, I am going to be using my piece of chalk for the next step. But again, I might wait for this to dry, and if I feel I want a second coat, I'll put a second coat. So you can certainly do the same, and then just get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're drawing an outline of our yarn balls and our dragon. I'm going to be using my chalk, but I do want to kind of forewarn you before we start this step that you make sure that your canvas is dry. So, you know, you could either take an extra long break if you'd like to, or find yourself a fun fanning method like your paper towel or blowing on it. Or you can do as I did and just whip out your blow dryer and blow dry it that way. So whatever way works for you, you'll just want to have that surface dry. It's much easier to draw on when it's dry. So I'm going to have 3 balls of yarn down in this corner in through here. I'm going to have my first one is going to be right here. I'm going to do my one that is in the front first. So I'm in maybe about 3 or 4 inches from the left-hand side and maybe up about an inch, inch and a half. And then I'm up maybe 4 or 5 inches from that. And I'm making myself a very uneven kind of circle for this. You don't need it to be perfect, because if you've ever worked with a ball of yarn, they're not perfect circles. It depends on how that yarn has been rolled around them, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another one that's going to sit kind of behind it. So I'm going to have this one coming maybe somewhere in through here. This one's going to be a little bit behind it, and maybe this one's going to come over in this direction. And again, they don't have to be perfect circles. And then I will have another one coming in through here, and I think this one's going to come down under here. I'm having mine go a little bit past that halfway point. So if this is halfway in your canvas, this right one is going to travel a little bit farther than that. Now since I've got my balls on here, I'm going to put my dragon shape in place with the big neck and the head. So I'm going to have my neck coming, it's going to come like in an S type of shape in through here, and I'm going to have it ending somewhere in this vicinity right here. So I'm just going to give myself a mark so I have a place to travel to. The nose, or the front of the face, I'm going to have somewhere in this vicinity. So I'm going to have that like a little bit of a flat shape to the front of the nose. So I'm just drawing myself a little bit of a diagonal line. I'm a couple inches in from the right and maybe 3 or 4 from the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect, and then this is, I would say this is maybe about 1.5 inches in my vertical or in that line. I'm going to connect this corner to here, and I'm going to be using this big S type of shape. I'm going to have the inside part of the neck. I don't want it any farther than this ball in through here. So I'm going to have the farthest part coming, I would say maybe about in through here. So I'm going to go in an upward direction, something, well, kind of like an over and up type of direction, like this. And I'm going to meet here, and then I'm coming back down in through here and I'm going to meet that front like this. And of course, once you've got the whole shape on, because we are working with chalk, you can certainly make any modifications that you want very easily, because chalk can erase with water. So once I've got that shape in through there, I want to do the exterior shape, but this is my starting point and I need an ending point. So my ending point is going to be kind of the bottom part of the back. So I'm going to have this kind of coming out from here. It's going to come over maybe about an inch or two, and this is where it's going to kind of curve up in through here. So this is going to come up like this. It's going to curve in a similar direction as this exterior one, but it's going to get more narrow as it comes up towards this point in through here, and then it'll come up in through here and then just meet down into the front. So you can start in here or the bottom, whatever way you like to. I'm going to just kind of travel up in through here, and I will be putting a bump for the eye and the nostril in a minute. So I'm going to just kind of get my shape on here, maybe a little bump up there like this, bring it around like this, nice and pretty narrow in through here. And then right as I start coming this corner around here, this is where it's going to start to widen a little bit. So in order for me to not go too wide, what I'll do is I'll just kind of bring this up and bring it in something like this, and just make sure that I don't go too wide. So sometimes you got to start from one end and work your way to the other, whatever works for you. I'm going to put a little nostril on the front part here, and then I'll put a bump for the eye socket in through here somewhere. We'll be doing all the little spines with paint later. And then I want to put my wing on. So I've got one of my tips somewhere in through here, and I'm just going to bring this down towards the body, something like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to do a kind of an inward curve like that. And then this, because this is a knitting project in process, we don't have to do the bottom perfect. It's just going to come into where the knitting needles end up. So what I'm going to do is on this right hand side, I'm going to kind of have a wavy type of line, like it's just the cloth that is in the process of being knitted. And then I'm stopping shy of here because I want this to kind of end up looking like it's at an angle, and then I'll just bring this in like this. And that's all I'm going to be doing for my outline. So you can put your chalk away or do any little modifications that you want, and we will be using our large brush for the next step, so you can just get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting the base coat of all of these sections that we just outlined. So I'm going to use my large brush. The colors I'm using are brown, white, yellow, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm first going to do what is going to be my white yarn, my dragon, and this ball of yarn right here. I'm going to do those in a medium light brown type of color. So what I've done is I have taken some of my brown and added a little bit of white. So I'll show you how I got there. I'm just taking some brown and adding just a touch of white to it in order to get it almost like a light milk chocolate kind of color. This is going to act as a great shadow base for the white yarn itself. So that's where I'm headed with that. And once I've got the color that I want, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint in these sections. There is no fancy brush stroke. I'm just trying to get some uneven edges around the actual yarn ball itself. So you can certainly see that I am making mine a little uneven. I'm going right up to my chalk mark, but if you end up seeing some of your chalk mark at the end, don't worry about it, because we got lots of steps to go on top of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint in my dragon main section in through here. So again, no special brush stroke. I'm just really kind of getting a good layer on there. As I come up in through the top, once I've got the main section painted in, I will do the beginning of my the spikes off of the back. I don't know what they're called. I I don't know, the spikes off of the back of the dragon, the mystical pieces of the dragon that I don't know the exact terms to, but I'll do those as well. I'm going to use just the corner of my brush, but as I come in through here, I'm just using the corner of my brush trying to get all the way up to the edges. If you wanted to, you could certainly use a smaller brush when you get to these smaller areas, but like I said, this is just the main base coat, so it doesn't need to be executed perfectly at this point. Once I get over in through here, this is where I'm going to decide where I want my little spikes to go. So I'm just doing these little triangles that are coming off of the back of the neck, and I'm bringing them all the way down until they meet the wing that's coming out the side. So I'm just using the corner of my brush, getting all these nice little triangles coming out, and you could of course do them even more or less than mine, totally up to you. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and do my next color, which is going to be the black ball of yarn. So I'm just washing and drying, and this is just going to be black paint. And again, I'm just going to kind of go right up to the edges and making this pretty uneven along the edges, so that way it'll resemble more of a realistic kind of ball of yarn. And if you bump into anything next to it that has wet paint on it, again, don't be alarmed, because we have to put all of those individual pieces of yarn on top of this. So if, like I just bumped into it right there, it'll all work itself out in the long run. So just know that there is no need for that to be perfect at this point. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to do the main coat for these two areas, which is going to be with my yellow. So just wash and dry. I'm going to save this one because it's right next to the wet black, so I will give that a second to dry. I'm going to go ahead and get this section painted in, and because my paint is translucent, and if you're using a similar type of paint that I am, I'm using a thin-bodied student grade paint. I know that my paint is going to be on the translucent side, so it will take on some of the appearance of the color that is underneath it, especially in these first layer or two as we're going through this process. So I'm utilizing the green that's underneath as a way to make this yellow a little bit darker, or take on a little bit different of a tonal value, so when we do the highlights on it later, it will have taken on some of that look to it, and it'll give it better dimension or more dimension. And again, if you bump into your dragon over here, the main body, that's okay. And then I'm just going to utilize this yellow to get this ball in through here. And then we are going to be utilizing this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your main coat on all of these sections, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to be doing for the next step is we're putting the shadow below our objects onto the surface. And we're also going to put the shadows on the objects themselves. So we're doing bottom shadows, I guess is a good word for this. We might put a little bit of a shadow in here and on this piece too, but I'll talk you through it. So what I really just want to do is give this a little bit more three-dimensional look to it. And I am assuming that my light source is kind of up above, maybe a little bit to the left. So I'm going to have my shadows directly below all of these objects. I'm going to be using my large brush. I will be using black and brown paint, but I do want to forewarn you too, your background's probably dry right now, but because we're going to be putting shadows on these objects as well, you'll want to make sure that those are dry also. So, you can do that whole routine with your blow dryer again if you want to. So when I do this, I'm going to be using, especially on the surface here, a really dry brush. So I'm not going to have a lot of paint on my brush at any one time. I'm going to be using primarily black and brown. But when I get into my objects, I might utilize some of that original color as well. And on this one here, it's already kind of shadowed under here, so we might end up putting just a little highlight on the top, but I'll talk about that when we get to it. And in through here, that'll be with some brown as well as maybe that base color. So I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm putting just a tiny bit of paint, tiny bit of brown, a tiny bit of black on my brush at the same time. I'm going to have it pretty darn dark right as it's underneath where it's just about hitting those objects. And I am just rubbing it out and letting it kind of dissipate into the surface as it gets farther away from that particular object. I want it really pretty dark in through here, and depending on where your light source is, you maybe have a little peekaboo spot in through here where you see the surface. If you want to bring that all black or all dark in through there, you certainly can. I'm reloading with just a little bit more paint. Because I'm using such a firm brush, I have the ability of pushing my paint into like the underneath edge of that particular piece of the object. Because it's firm, I can push it that way, and I can kind of keep adjusting that darkness. If I want it to go darker and darker as it's hitting that object, I can do that. And then I can, as I'm running out of paint, that's when I start to bring it into the neighboring area of the surface. So that allows that shadow to dissipate or fade into the surface that it's on. You could always pick up a little bit of that surface color too, and I'm giving mine a little bit of the shape of that particular object as well. So you can certainly make your shadows as dramatic or subtle as you want. I'm also bringing this one up the side a little bit, so that's going to give you the information that it's a three-dimensional object. It'll give you a little bit more of an illusion in through there. This one here is off of the surface, so it's not touching the surface that it's on. So I'm going to put that shadow a little bit further away from it, so that way it'll look like it is off the surface itself. So once I've got the floor or the whatever they're resting on surface, now I can go ahead and do the objects themselves. So I'm not washing my brush, so I have black and brown. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that base color as well. I have very little paint on my brush. I need to pick up a little bit more. So I'm going with the black and brown on my brush plus a little bit of that base color itself. This is going to give me a nice shadow at the bottom of that particular object, which again will just add to the dimensional aspect of it. And as I come up the object, I just keep picking up that base color and getting it to blend in, and that will allow you to have a gradual kind of shadow that comes from the top to the bottom. I got this is the same color in through here, so I'm just going to give myself a little bit of black and brown with my original color on there. Shadows are typically just going to be whatever the surface is, only darker. So you don't always need to go black on a shadow. You can just take whatever color is that surface and add a little bit of darkness to it. So those two are good. I think I'm going to use this color just to add a tiny bit of a highlight on the top of this one. Because it's black, you can't really add a shadow to it. So just a little bit of a highlight there. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush and put the shadow on these two sections. So again, I'm going with my base coat, a little bit of black and brown and that yellow. And that's going to give me this darkness at the bottom of this ball in through here. And if you feel like you've done too much, just kind of rinse your brush off with water, pick up some of that base coat, and you can get it to blend in, or just let it dry and you can come back with a little bit lighter. But the darker it is, the more it's going to look natural, like this is the dark side over here. That totally works. And then I just keep picking up my yellow to make sure that it gets nice and light as it's going towards the top. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So this one, I want a little bit of shadow in through here as well as in this area here. So I have brown, a touch of black on my brush. I'm going to go right in this little corner in through here. Just a little bit. I'm not being really dramatic with it, just a little bit, so it shows that that little area dips in just a little bit. And then I'm just kind of rubbing it out so it fades out. And I'm going to put some in through here as well, because we're going to have this little piece kind of flipping up at the end where it's being knitted. So I'm just adding a little bit of darkness down in through here to give it that illusion as we progress through the painting. And then we are going to be utilizing this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your shadows on here, you can wash and dry your large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our yarn, or the definition of the yarn, on the wing, as well as a little yellow patch in front of on the chest of the dragon. So I'm using my big brush. The colors I'm using are white and yellow, but I also might use a little bit of brown too if I feel I need to. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to put in some white kind of delineation lines on the wing. So I'm picking up some white. My trick throughout this entire yarn process is when I pick up paint with my bristle brush, I will be squishing my brush on the side of my palette with the paint in it. So what's going to happen is my bristles will get squished together, and I will be able to make these like continual dot marks that are going to give you the illusion of knitted yarn. It's not going to be photorealistic, but it will definitely give you a good illusion of some knitted yarn. So I'm going to do that along this top edge, and I'm just kind of dotting it with the side of my brush. I'm going to do one coming down the center, but I don't want it totally straight, so I'm going to just kind of come with a little bit of an angle of sorts, just to give the implication of movement on the piece of fabric, so something like this. And then I'm going to give maybe one more in through here, and again, this to me resembles the the things on a real wing that hold the rest of the light airy stuff together. So maybe the cartilage of sorts. So something like this. I, again, don't know the correct anatomy of a dragon, but I know that they've got, some of them can have this stuff on them. So without washing my brush, I'm going to pick up some yellow with my white, and I'm going to put in place this area in the front. I'm using the brown as my base coat, so it has a little bit more of a of dimension to it. I'm going to start it a little bit higher than this mark here. So if you come over to here and then just travel up maybe about an inch or so, that's about where I'm going to start it. And I'm just going to be using the tip of my brush, and I'm going to go right on top of the brown. And I don't want it to be really solid of a color, so I'm really just kind of dotting it in a speckly type of fashion right now. You can go over the edge a little bit. I am going to come back in a minute and give it a little bit more highlight, but right now I'm just kind of putting it in place. As I come down in through here, I'm going to make it maybe a little bit more narrow as it meets the ball of yarn in through there. And then I'm going to use the same dotting technique to put the rows within the wing. So again, I have yellow and white on my brush, but whenever I feel my brush splaying out on me, that's when I'm going to take it, I'm going to re-squish it in the side of my palette. And for me, I'm going to have my rows just kind of going in the same direction that I put the white ones. So it's going to start maybe a little bit skinnier at the top, and then just kind of splay out a little bit as it's coming down towards the bottom part of it. And you might find, which I found when I was doing when I was practicing this, that you might want to come back and do multiple layers on top of your rows. You might find that once you've got this first layer on here, when it dries, it might be a little bit darker, so you could certainly come in and do a second coat on top of it. So just play with that as it's drying. Just continue to look at it, and if you want to elevate these rows of stitching at all, once it dries, you'll be able to come back and maybe with a lighter version or a little bit more white on your brush, you can certainly add that into there. So in order for me to not get confused where I'm going, here I kind of started in the middle and worked my way out. Here I'm started in the ends and working my way in, just so I can keep the rhythm of the wave or the direction that I put those white things in. So this light part in through here, this is going to be in essence kind of flipping up later, so I don't necessarily need to be terribly concerned about going too far past my shadow area in through here, but I am again trying to keep those rows in a consistent fashion with what I did with that yellow area, or with the white outlines. So I'm just kind of continuing to put these rows on here and trying to make it look like it makes sense to me and sense to the viewer. And again, if you wanted to, you can continue to add little bits of, you can go back and add another row on top with a little bit more lightness to it. That's going to make it look like it's got more movement to it. Like right now it looks like it's kind of bumping out a little bit, which looks fabulous. You can go all the way to the edges in through here. Make sure that you've got that going on all the way, or don't go too far like I just did, but you can certainly have fun with that. And then in through here, I'm just going to pick up a little bit more white, make sure that I've got that. It's a nice highlight right on the edge. Make sure that the brightness of whatever room this little guy is in, or girl, this could be a girl dragon, is nice and illuminated on that chest. And then we're going to utilize the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your yellow areas done, you can wash and dry your large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're adding the yarn seams of sorts on the whole dragon. So I'm going to use my large brush. My dominant color is going to be white, but I'm sure I'll probably go into some brown, especially when I come down towards this darker or more shaded area down in through here. So I'm going to practice the same process that I did for the wing, only this time I'm just going to be using white. So I'm going to squish my paint, or squish my brush in the paint on the side of my palette, so my bristles are all nice and under control. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself kind of an initial roadmap, so I can just kind of start and go in the same direction as the spine, so to speak, or as that chest S goes, and then bring it down in through here. And then I'm just going to kind of keep working my way out. So in some areas, obviously this is wider than here, so your stitching might get more bunched up in through this area. So that would make a lot of sense. And I'm just going to kind of travel down in through this area. And again, this is going to be one of those processes that you may end up doing multiple layers on it as you're going through the process and it's drying. Your white might turn a little bit darker as it dries, and then when it is dry, you can come back and put these little like speckly highlights on it. When I get to this yellow part in through here, I am going to purposely leave some of that brown in between, so that way it looks like it's almost shadowed where the yellow meets the lighter area, so you can play with that as well. And if you get to an area and you're like, oh my god, I put too much in through there, just wait a minute, let it dry, and you can always come back with one of the brown, a brown line in through the tan that we created in through for that base coat. So you can always bring that base coat back. So in through the front area, I know that this would probably be more tighter stitching and our light sources up top, so I'm going to go a little bit more aggressive with my dots in this area just so I ensure that it is a little bit lighter. I do have an eye that I'm going to be putting on in through here, so I will preserve myself a little bit of like an almond type of shape where that eye is going to go. So something like this. My nostril, my mouth, I'm going to just paint on top or intermingle them with the paint in a little bit. So I'm just kind of getting this to be a little bit on the fluffier side as it's coming towards the nose area. So I'm still giving the implication of the rows of the needlework or of the yarn, but I definitely don't need to make sure every single row is represented. You can certainly kind of get them to squash together a little bit and have that that more condensed look to them. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some up in this eye socket area, something like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and go along the edge where it's going to be meeting these spiky things along the back spine area. So again, I'm just kind of giving myself some rows and making sure that I've got them going in a direction that would make sense to the person who has knitted this. So you can see with that brown underneath, it's really giving it a great dimensional look to it. And because we're using the side of this bristly type of brush, it's giving us that soft texture to it, like the needlework. I used to have an aunt who, my Auntie Linda, she used to knit and crochet everything under the sun. So she used to do little creatures that would sit on top of a tissue box holder. So like you'd go into the bathroom and there'd be this little crocheted critter on top of the tissue box. It was tough to figure out where the tissue box was, but these kind of things always remind me of her. So, and she used to just concentrate so hard and make them look so perfect. So this is, I'm trying to honor her craftsmanship in a painting, which I'm sure I'm not going to do it full justice, but I'm definitely giving it a shot. My mom used to do crochet too, but my mom didn't knit as much. She crocheted more, and she was more of giving us the hats and the mittens and the warm clothing as opposed to the cute little critters. But so everybody has their own different purpose or reason or, excitement when it comes to knitting and crocheting. So you find your own. Mine is in painting. But I'm merging the best of the craft little worlds. I'm going to put a little bit more brown down as I come down back here, but while I have just the white on my brush, I'm going to work on these little spikes. So again, I'm just going to kind of use the corner of my brush and give myself some little spikes like this, and then maybe just dot in the middle of them. So I'm not quite sure how these would be knitted, so I'm just kind of going with whatever's coming off of my brush, and in whatever process is easy for my paintbrush to create them, which is I'm sure not the same exact processes as it would be with your knitting needles, but we're trying to give a good representation here. So, and let's see, just go up these other little sides. So I'm just, I guess, making a whole bunch of little dots for my spikes, but they look like triangles, so that's working out for me. So some little triangles. And then as I come down this backside, I really want this to look like it's still kind of in the shadowy type of area. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the base brown, that tan color, plus the white. So as I come down here, it's just going to naturally stay a little bit darker than what we put on the front side, and that way it'll give it a natural kind of shadow in this back side. So right now I feel like my brush is a little bit splaying too much for me. It's not getting the clean lines or the dots that I want. So what that's telling me is I have too much paint in the body of my bristles. So I'm going to just give it a good squeeze in my paper towel. I'm not going to wash it. I just wanted to get some of that thick paint out of the center, and I'm going to just reload it with some brown and the white. Usually when I squish it on the side of my palette, I can take care of the majority of that, but it wasn't working out for me. So I had to seek alternative methods. And then as I come down here, I'm just going to give it that same kind of curve like the exterior parts of the body. And then I'm just going to finish up in through here, kind of get these to fade off into the darkness in through there. And then I would suggest just let yours dry for a minute. If you feel like once it's dry that you want to add any additional layers to it. Like you could just reload and just add a couple more speckles of white here and there, and that's going to give you an even deeper dimensional look to it. So if once it dries you've got some dark spots, just feel free to come back through and add a little bit of lightness here and there. And then we are going to switch to our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your yarn appearing on the body itself, you can put your large brush away wherever you'd like to. Take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our facial features on our dragon. So I'm going to use my small brush. I am using yellow, white, and black, but you know, this is your dragon. You can really use whatever colors that you'd like. Maybe you want yours to have a beautiful purple eye or a gray mysterious eye. You can really do whatever you want. I'm doing yellow, so it's complementary to the rest of the knitted dragon, but again, you can make yours whatever you'd like. So I just picked up some yellow on my small brush. I'm going to be putting my eye in here, but I'm not going to be taking up all of the brown space. I'm going to make mine kind of like an almond type of shape, but again, who's to say that your dragon eye has to look like mine? You can make yours whatever shape you'd like. So I'm just doing a little kind of almond type shape. I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up a teeny bit of black paint to put a little tiny nostril in through here. So I'm putting my nostril kind of towards the top. And then I'm going to put a tiny little mouth in through here. So I don't want them to be really bold. So once I put the lines on there or the marks on there, I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel and I'm going to pick up some white paint and dot around them. So they definitely are kind of subtle. And they look like they've just been knitted on there, maybe a little knot or something, but I want to make sure those edges are nice and subtle. And then I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bit of eye detail. So I'm picking up a little bit of black paint. I wiped my brush off on my paper towel. I'm going to do a little bit of black kind of underneath, something like this. Maybe a little black pupil somewhere in through here. But of course you can be the judge if you want that. And then wipe my brush off on my paper towel. Picked up a little bit of white and I'm going to give a little bit of a sparkle kind of in the front part of the eye. Something like that. And that's all I'm going to do for my facial features. You can certainly have fun and manipulate yours any way that you want, but that's what I'm going to do for mine. And I'm going to be using my small brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our knitting needles. I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors that I'm using are purple, brown, black, and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm just going to do kind of a thin base coat, and then I'm going to go back and add a little bit of a highlight and a shadow, and they'll magically look like beautiful, shiny lavender knitting needles by the time we're done. So what I'm going to do for my first coat is I'm going to be using purple with just a touch of white. The white's going to help it so it's not so see-through. You could even pre-mix it a little bit so it's not so it can be whatever tonal value that you want it to be, but I'm just going for like a lavender kind of color. So purple with a touch of white. I'm going to show you where I'm going to start my needles and end them. So they're going to be in this vicinity, like this and this, because they're going to be knitting this piece here. So the points, the skinny parts are going to be here, and those are going to be far away from the viewer. The ends of the knitting needles that are the closest to the viewer are going to be on the edges of our canvas. So the needles are going to be really skinny here and really wide as they meet the edges of the canvas. So I have pre-marked mine, and I'll show you where I've made the markers. So I have a mark down at the bottom. This is a little bit to the right of my halfway mark, so I'm just making myself a mark there. The other mark I have is maybe about 3 inches up here. I've got it a little bit higher than all of my objects in through here, so right about here. The tip of this one, if you travel up, 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 I've got the tip of mine right in this vicinity, which is, I would say, a little bit lower than this ball, not by much, and then just on the inside edge of the wing itself. And then the tip of this one is a little bit lower than this one, and just as it crosses over into the body in through here. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect my dots. I want my skinny end to be the top two and my wide end to be the bottom two. So I started there, and as I'm going towards my wider end, I'm pushing my brush harder. So what that's doing is that's allowing for my line to get wider and wider as it goes towards the edge. And I'm just doing a thin layer right now just to kind of get it on here. And then I'm going to do the same thing right here. So just really skinny up at the top. And then I'm going to push my brush a little bit harder, harder, harder. This one's going to be really close to us. So this one can be even, I would say, 1/2 inch to 1 inch wide as it meets the bottom of your canvas. So you just kind of keep widening it, widening it. It's a tough word to say, widening it. Sorry. Sometimes my head goes funny sometimes. You keep making it wider as it comes towards the bottom of your canvas. And then I'm just going to kind of straighten it up a little bit. And again, it doesn't have to be really super straight. You're going to have pieces of yarn that are going to steer the viewer's attention away from it if it's not perfect. Once I have it on there, then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm picking up a touch of black paint. I'm going to have this needle is going to be on top of this one in through here. So I picked up a little bit of black paint. I'm putting a shadow at the bottom side of this needle in through here. So just a little bit of black paint at the bottom of this needle, something like this. And my first layer is just about dry, which is great. So once I've got that shadow on there, I'm just going to pick up that purple lavendery color that I made and just get this to blend in a little bit. I think I have too much black on my brush. I just washed and dried my brush. And I'm just going to pick up some more of that purple color and then just make sure that it kind of blends in with that shadow that I just created. And again, yours might end up really dark. They might end up really light. It's all okay. There can be various colors in knitting needles. So again, I'm just picking up a little bit of black and purple. I'm going to put my shadow on this one. It's going to be on the bottom side. So just a little bit of black and purple on my brush right now to get this shadow side on here. And I'm just bringing it all the way down the bottom edge of the knitting needle. And then I'm going to get it to just kind of blend in with the purple. So you can reload the purple if you want to, or just get it to blend in as you see fit. And you might need to do a couple of layers on yours. I'm going to put a little bit of white paint on my brush in a second here. So now I'm adding a little bit of white paint to add a highlight onto it. So my highlight is going to, the highlight doesn't necessarily have to be right at the edge, the exterior edge, because these are round objects. You can have the highlight being a little bit away from the edge a bit, and that's going to give you the illusion of the form of it. So I'm just putting my white paint on here, making sure that it kind of blends in with the neighboring colors. And of course you can make yours keep coming back with it. Mine are turning a little silver on me, which is great with the black and the white. I might enhance the purple in a minute once it dries, but you can certainly have fun with yours. And you know, this is one of those steps. It might take a little bit of finessing as it's drying, just adding a little bit more of the colors that you want. Again, I just added some white and purple onto my brush to get my highlight going on this one. And again, the white is going to make it so it's not so see-through. So if you're having any difficulty with your purple being see-through, the white will definitely help with the opacity of it to make it so it's not so see-through. And then if your paint isn't drying on you fast enough and you're having difficulty with it, just you're seeing everything that's underneath it because you just keep lifting the paint, just give it a minute, let the paint dry, and then you can come back on top and add another layer to it, which might be my goal, because I think I want mine a little more purple. And right now my white is making it a little bit duller than I wanted to, but once you've got this all nailed down, and again, just have fun with it. Don't feel that you have to do, you know, them perfect. You're gonna have a whole bunch of yarn in through here. You know, you just want to make it so they're, you know, seemingly straight, because I think knitting needles tend to be on the straighter side. And then we're going to use this same small brush for the next step. So once you've got these done, you can wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing the balls of yarn in through here. So I'm going to use my small brush. The colors I'm using are white, yellow, black, and tan, and maybe some brown too. So really what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be just doing long streaks in a little bit of an arcing motion on each one of them to simulate the pieces of yarn all rolled around it. When I am up towards this top left edge, I'm going to be making these pieces of yarn the lightest. So this will have some gray in it, and this will have some white. Obviously this is the white one anyways, but as it tips back towards the shadowy area, that's when I want the pieces of yarn to be a little bit darker. So for the yellow, for instance, I'd probably use yellow with a little bit of brown and maybe a little bit of white, but I'll try and call them out as I'm using them. I'm going to start with this one, then go to this one, and then this one. So that way this one is behind this one. So if I bump into it, I'll be able to correct it when I go to do the black ball. And same thing, when I do this one, if I bump into this by accident, I'll be able to correct it afterwards when I go to do this one. So I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to start with yellow and white on my brush at the same time. And I'm really just going to be doing a whole bunch of chaotic streaks throughout the ball. So you can do any variation of the colors. You want it to kind of look like it is being strung around. You want to make sure that you get all of the areas that would be hidden or encapsulating the whole thing. I just picked up some brown so I can get some of this bottom area. We have a great base color underneath there, so I'm not concerned about doing every square inch of it, but I do want to make sure it looks natural. So if I've got this area meeting the black, I want to make sure that I bring some pieces of yarn in, you know, that look like they would be wrapping around that ball in that direction. And this is my yellow ball of yarn, so I want to make sure that I represent the yellow the most. So even if I'm using some brown or some white to add highlights or dimension to it, my main color is that yellow, and I want to make sure that that's the color that the ball of yarn looks like. I don't want it to look like a white ball of yarn. And I'm trying to do some of my strokes continual, so it looks like, you know, this goes all the way to the other side, or this one goes all the way to the other side, and I just keep crisscrossing them until I feel that it looks full enough and that I've got enough strings around that ball of yarn to make it look nice and natural, and that I kept the bottom dark or darker than that top. So even if you have to, like I just picked up some brown, you can certainly incorporate that, or maybe even a little bit of black. If you felt like it wasn't dark enough, bring in a little bit of black. That would totally work. And then I'm just going to wash and dry my brush and move on to the next one. So this one, of course, is just black, but you can't just do black on top of black. So I'm going to do black with a tiny bit of white on my brush at the same time. And I don't know how bright this is going to be coming off of my brush, so I'm going to start up at the brightest area in through here. So, and I can give myself some full strokes going in, you know, any which direction that I want. I'm curving them so they look like they are coming off or creating this circular object, which is the ball of yarn. And you can see I'm doing, you know, many in one direction, and then I just go reload my brush and put a little bit more on my brush and do some more coming in another direction. But again, all the while I am using that circular type of brush stroke, and I want to make sure that I keep this back area pretty dark. So if I run into a spot where I'm like, oh man, I put too much lightness to it, just pick up straight black and do the black on top of some of your lighter pieces, and make sure that you've cleaned up this edge where it meets the next ball of yarn. So I'm just going to kind of keep making sure that I've got that in through there. And then when you feel like you've got enough, you know, you can keep going as much as you want to, making the black ones go on top of the gray ones and vice versa. But once you feel like you've got enough, I feel like I want a little bit more lightness up in the top and through here, I'm going to wash and dry my brush. This is fun. it's fun painting yarn. I'm gonna wash and dry my brush and go on to the white ball of yarn. And again, similar to the yellow, this is white. So I want to, it's meant to represent the white yarn. So I want to make sure that is my dominant color. So I just picked up white paint to start, and I'm going to make sure that I have, oh, that piece is gonna grow, that I have good representation of that white. I'm going to kind of keep crossing over in these various directions. And again, if I feel like at any time I've put too much, or if I want it to transition back into that darker area, that's when I can pick up some of my base color, which is the tan, and just get those pieces to be represented. I didn't wash my brush, so this is going to give me a variety of shades and tones of this color throughout. And I'm just going to kind of keep going until I feel like I've got enough representation of the white yarn on here. And again, I've got to make sure it looks white and not tan. So I have to make a conscious effort to just kind of keep going with that white, especially over on this left hand side. And you can get it to go, you know, as far around as you want. You can get it to go in different directions. Just you want it to look like it is going in a direction that it would naturally go, I guess. So if you've got something coming down here, just get it to naturally go, I guess, on the other side of the yarn and in that kind of same direction. Yeah, something like that. This is also one of those childhood chores of making sure all what were they called? Something yarn. Not when they're in balls, but when they're in those long tubes. Skein, yarn skein. Ooh, I think I pulled that word right out of my filing cabinet up there. Skein of yarn. So when my mom used to crochet, so we would have to. She liked the yarn better when it was in balls, so we would sit there and ball it up from the skein. So it's childhood memories are just flowing out of my head today on this painting. And then once you feel that you've got enough on this white one, you can wash and dry the small brush, because we're going to be using our small brush for the next step. So just get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing the little tail end of the wing, where the knitting needles are actually working on it, as well as we're going to put the yarn on the knitting needles, and we're going to connect that yarn to this ball in through here. So I'm using my small brush. I'm using yellow, white, black, and brown to do this entire thing. So how I'm going to first start this is I'm just using some yellow paint on my brush. I'm going to put my pieces of yarn on the needles themselves. I'm going to be doing this in a curved type of brush stroke, so that way it implies the shape of the needle. So I'm starting somewhere in through here, and I'm going to bring this down. And you can use a good amount of paint on this. You don't have to be shy with your quantity of paint. So I've got one in through there. It wraps around underneath, and then I'm going to go ahead and do 3 more of those on the right side on this one, but to the right of that center one. So again, just kind of wrapping this around. And so again, I'm using pretty thick paint. I'm going to come back and do a highlight and a shadow in a couple of minutes, but right now I'm just kind of getting the paint on here so it looks like it's wrapping around the needle. And of course you probably, you know, yellow on top of yellow, that background, you might not see it too well yet, but you will be able to when we put that highlight and shadow on there. So I've got my third one in through here, and I'm just trying to consciously keep the shape of the needle itself. And then I'm going to do 3 more on this one, but these ones are going to be curving up like this. So I've got this one starting here, and I'm going to curve it like that. And of course the yarn should be kind of the same thickness, but the loop itself would get you know, bigger or smaller based on where it is on the actual needle itself. So that would just be a perspective kind of thing. There we go, like that. I think I have a little chunk in my paint. See if I can get it out. There we go, I got it out. And then once I've got that in through there, I'm going to go ahead and put the string or the piece of yarn that's going to connect from here to, it's going to just kind of disappear behind here. So I'm just going to have it coming, I would say, maybe I've got this coming, we're going to have it come in somewhere in through here, and I'm going to have it coming down, like just gravity's taking over like this, and then I'm going to loop it back up to meet my my ball of yarn in through here. So something like this, and you just want it, they're going to be behind the needle, so you just want it to look like they are the same piece of string or yarn. And of course you can, if you bump into your needle, you can certainly fix that later if you need to. So just getting that on there. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to give myself the edge of this piece in through here. So it's going to be connected between here and here. So I'm going to put, I have yellow on my brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white, and I'm just going to give myself kind of like a dotted line going across in through here to make it look like it's the ruffled edge of the tail or of the wing that we're doing. So something like that. And then what I'm going to do, I want this to look like it's connected over here. So I'm just going to bring this down, dot, 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 and get it to come back up this side in through here. And then I'm just going to kind of get this to fade off into the distance, or you could even get it to connect into one of these rows. So this is just, we're just kind of giving it the illusion that this area that we're knitting is then turning into that the wing itself. So I'm just giving it these kind of curved dotted rows to emulate the dotted rows that are in the rest of the stuffed animal that we're knitting in through here. And of course you can certainly modify it any way that you want. I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I want to make sure that this looks like it's got enough dimension. So I'm going to put a tiny bit of brown paint on my brush to give this a little bit more shadow in through here. So if yours isn't nice and dark in this little corner here, you can just pick up a little bit of brown paint, and even in through here, above here, that darkness is going to give this the appearance of this is on the outside and that is on, you know, that's on the inside. So you can certainly play with that all you want. And if you need to add any more little designs to your knitted thing, feel free to do so. I think I'm going to put a little bit more yellow on my brush just to make sure this doesn't look too white. Again, this is meant to look like the underside of it, but it's still the yellow piece, so I don't want it to go too white on me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow on these pieces of yarn that are on the needles themselves. So I'm just picking up a tiny bit of black paint, And I'm assuming that my light is up top. So to me, my shadows would be on this side over in through here. So I'm just putting a little tiny black curved line on the needle itself with a little bit of black paint on my brush, just going a little slower so I can make sure that I have that little curve that I want. That works. And then on these ones, I'm going to do it on the right side of them. So it doesn't have to go all the way to the top of the needle, but I definitely make sure I don't have any wet paint on my hand. I definitely want to have some sort of shadow over on that needle on the right hand side. So again, doesn't have to go all the way to the top. If you felt it needed to, you could certainly bring it all the way to the top, but I'm going almost to the top, but I just want to make sure that I have that shadow in through there. And you can even, if you don't already have one, make sure that you have a shadow underneath here where that top needle would be casting a shadow on the bottom needle. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush. And now I'm going to do the opposing thing, which is put a highlight on it. So I'm going to put a highlight on this piece as well. My shadow for this is going to actually be on the surface, so I'm not going to tackle that yet. So I'm just adding a little bit of white paint on my brush. I want to just give this a little bit of a highlight so you can really just see it. I don't want it to get lost in the background because it's the same tonal value as that background, so I want to just kind of get it a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit dark in through here as it's coming off of the ball, but definitely as it's coming in through there, just a little bit lighter. Then I'm adding some white highlights to these little guys in through here. So again, I'm just kind of doing like a little stripe to them, but in that same curve, I'm putting the highlight at the top part where I feel the light would be at the top, and I'm not painting the whole thing. This is just giving you the illusion of the highlight on the top piece of the yarn. And then we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your yarn piece and these little pieces in through here all nice and done, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to be doing for the next step is we're painting the shadows of our knitting needles and the string, and it's probably all because we've got shadows of everything else on there. So I want these shadows to be on the surface, so that's going to give you that extra bit of dimensional element. So I'm actually using my small brush. I'm going to be using black and brown, but I'm also going to be using water on my brush, so that way I can have it translucent and keep it moving while I want to put it in place. So I think I'm going to do my needles first, and I want them to kind of be the shadow to be cast upon this little piece here as well, but this little piece is in the air. So it's going to be, if I do this one here, I've got my shadow that's going to be going from the rear end of it all the way to about here, and then it's going to jump onto this piece here that's in the air. So you'll see what I'm going to do. And then I'll talk you through the others, but we don't need to know about all of them right off the bat. So I'm going to put a little bit of brown and a little bit of black on my brush. I'm going to wipe it on my side of my palette. I'm dipping my brush in my water as well. So that way I have this really translucent fluid paint on my brush right now, which I will be able to control. So I want it coming from here to, I'm going to say right about, let's bring it right about here. So here we go. I just started it in through there. I'm bringing it down towards the rear end here. I want it pretty wide as it's meeting the bottom portion in through here because the needle is wider. So I'm just kind of like re-wet my brush so I can get this shadow to move around as I am positioning it in through here. So something like that. And then I want it to come up in through here, hopping right onto that piece of fabric, something like that. And then this one is going to be going in the in kind almost the opposite direction. I'm thinking like that their shadow is kind of meeting in through here. So I'll bring this one like this on here, and then it's got to jump down onto the ground. So I've got it jumping down onto the ground in through here, and then it would go something like this. I need it a little bit darker so you can see it on top of that original one that we did. So just added a bit more black and water to my brush so you can see it. There's no sense in putting it on there if you can't see it. So something like that. And then I have this one in through here. So this shadow meets the needle in the shadow because that's what it's connected to. So I have to use my logical thought process here. So this is off the ground. So it's going to cast a shadow somewhere in through here, coming, you know, on the surface in through here, and then it's got to travel to this needle, which is where it would be traveling to. So I'm going to have it come in something like, let's see, let's go from here, and then, sorry, I like it when I just quiet all of a sudden because I actually have to think for a second. So we're going to go somewhere in through here because I still feel like it's off the ground. So I'm going to make that shadow go a little bit away from it. It's going to come over on this side of my needle, and then it's going to come back in through here, something like that. And of course, your placement of your shadows might be a little bit different based on where your yarn is placed or where where you feel like your light source is, but this is what I'm going to do with mine. And then we're going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I'm going to be using my small brush. I am using black paint, and I think I'm going to sign this in the bottom left corner. So I sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be is totally fine. It's your painting. You sign it however you would like. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a very creative knitted composition, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.